Can you guys hear me right at the top?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for making the time to listen to my conversation around building with data. You'll be surprised, a lot of companies, even founders such as ourselves, don't take the time to do market research before we start building our businesses. And so kudos to you guys for even taking the time to attend this talk. Now, before we get into the details of this conversation, I'm going to start off a bit simple and ask you guys a few questions. So, quick show of hands. Who here has built a business and failed at it? All right, look around the room, guys. Keep your hands up, please. Okay, not to put you guys on the spot, but that's usually what happens when you start off by building without the data. Okay? Now, my second question to you is, who here has built a product without any prior market research?
Yeah. Without background, no. Yeah. No.
Okay, we have a few guilty individuals here. Now, my last question, which probably applies more to me than anyone in the room, but who here has built a business with a name that people cannot pronounce? Oh, excellent. Thank you. It's two of us at least.
Okay.
And you. Three of us in the room. Well, for me, that's a bit of a double whammy because I have a name, the first name, as you probably heard, and a business name that people cannot pronounce. So I'm the founder and CEO of Datadvise, which is a market research firm and consulting firm that I started in 2020. At the time, playing around with AI, I decided to put together Data and Advise. And so Datadvise is kind of a derivative of that. Turns out people don't know how to pronounce D and V put together. And then my first name is Thamsanqa Ndlovu. And that's a Ndebele name. I'm originally from the southern part of Africa in Zimbabwe. And there are a lot of clicks in the language. So I can understand if you haven't learned the language, it's very difficult to pronounce. There are a lot of clicks. For example, the X is a click. The C is a click. The Q is a click. So my name is Thamsanqa Ndlovu. Professionally, I have worked with a lot of different businesses, from Fortune 50s to your local governments to founders such as yourselves. And throughout that process, working with different businesses, providing them the market research, I've been giving them sort of like a 5,000-foot snapshot of what's going on within their business environment. Basically, helping them understand who their competitors are, market trends, helping them understand the lay of the land, essentially, what could disrupt their industry. And right now, more recently, with the advent of artificial intelligence, helping them understand that piece as well. And this is work that I've been doing globally. Some household names that you've probably heard of, X before Musk, some of the web conferencing platforms that you probably use on a daily basis. I've helped figure out their product roadmaps and help their executive leadership teams build products that work. So that's my expertise. And I've distilled a lot of that information into my upcoming book, which I'm very excited about, which is called The Calculated Leader. So over the course of the next, say, 20 minutes, I'm going to be sharing, let's go to the next slide, please. I'm going to be sharing with you the problem of building blindly, which essentially is the problem of building without data. As you saw, a few people put their hands up and are facing that problem. And I'm going to show you just how widespread that problem is and also provide you with some solutions. I'm not just going to leave you high and dry. You're going to have some solutions, namely the 3D formula and the valid framework. Those are the things we're going to discuss. Let's move on to the next slide. Now, a couple of years ago, CP Insights, for those of you who are unfamiliar with CP Insights, they're a data aggregator. They collect a lot of information from founders, startups, etc. And they conducted a post-mortem analysis. In essence, they want to find out why entrepreneurs and startups fail. And as you can see, the number one reason why startups fail is because there is no market need. In other words, people build off sheer excitement and not solving a real pain point that then results in the failure of these startups. 42%. Now, that number is tied to running out of cash, which is number 2. Combined, those two stats, you can see they account for at least 71% of the failure rate of new businesses. And in some cases, these are businesses that had received at least 5 million, 8 million, 10 million in annual recurring revenues and in sometimes investment, but they still ran out of money. The reason is because when you build out of excitement, what you're doing in essence is you're building a product that the market does not need. Even if you have traction from a few customers, there is no business model to scale that at a global, in a global scale. And so that becomes problematic because you're unable to continually get revenue and help your business increase its cash flow and then survive. So that's the problem that exists in the market today, and I'm going to be offering you some solutions for that. Let's move on to the next slide.
Yeah. Hey, listen.
Now I've come up with something called the 3D formula. And essentially what this is it's a way for people to better make decisions. Starting with data, the formula essentially is data multiplied by deliberation, multiplied by discipline, results in calculated leadership. Now let's break down what this means. In essence, this is the starting point for creating a culture of data-driven decision-making. Whether you are someone who hasn't been using data before, or someone who is interested in, say, for example, drowning in information and interested in distilling what that information means, this is the formula that you can use. The data element is where we begin. How do you begin to gather information about your market? That's the first step, gathering that market intelligence, gathering who your competitors are, gathering trends, having a great understanding of the business environment, like I said, that 5,000-foot snapshot within which you're operating. That's the fundamental starting point for any business that you're building. Now, the second phase of that is interpreting that data. What does it mean for you? What does it mean for your business? That becomes the second phase. And after having gathered all that information, there's the second phase, which is related to deliberation. The reason why I included deliberation in here is because as human beings, sometimes when you're given an option to, let's say, for example, invest, someone gives you $1 million and someone says, go ahead and invest this. Maybe you might put it in bonds, maybe you'll put it in real estate, maybe you'll put it in stocks. But what you're doing essentially is you're essentially building out scenarios based on your own understanding without necessarily considering the universe of options that exist. You're not exhausting the options that are out there. And so you fall into fallacious reasoning where you think about this as a sort of false dilemma between two options, whereas there could be other options out there that you could be exploring. So the deliberation stage is really aimed at forcing individuals to think outside of the box, to figure out exactly what other options exist and figure out the best course, the worst case, and maybe the base case. So that's what deliberation is all about. And the third piece, which I feel is, let's just go back to the previous one. The third piece really is about discipline. I'm also guilty of this. A lot of people who make decisions, they take a step and then they fail after a week or two, tend to give up. However, with discipline comes successful outcomes. And so what this means in the context of building is that you need to continually iterate. You need to continually learn from the mistakes that you're making, what comes out of the actions that you're implementing. And if you look at this formula, it's a loop. And so once you get that new information, you feed it right back to the data element, and therefore you have an infinite cycle of data-driven decision-making. In essence, that's what the 3D formula is all about. So if you haven't been making any data-driven decisions to this point, that's what you should be applying in order to at least get you started thinking about how to use data when you're building out your business. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, a company approached us, Clutch Technologies. They were making about 20 million in annual recurring revenue. They wanted to figure out how they could grow their platform. And so in trying to determine this, they wanted to figure out whether or not they should expand their analytics platform. Should they add new features? Is this going to generate new revenue for us? And so what do? We looked at the data. What was the market like? Was there a need for these new features? Was there a need for them to expand this analytics platform? And so we found out that there was a need for this product. There was a need for people to use analytics in their marketing to assess information. And so we decided that they should build this product. But there was an issue. Would people really adopt this at scale? So the adoption issue was what led us to think about deliberation. What else could they do instead of building out the new features that could help them? And so we thought about maybe phasing that out. We thought about maybe tweaking prices. And we thought about maybe continuing and building it out full on. However, we decided to phase the rollout of these features. And from there, we decided, after having deliberated on the 3 different options and choosing the best course of action, we said to ourselves, well, we need to infuse discipline in this process. How are we going to be disciplined? As founders, the way to be disciplined is to set up KPIs, right? We decided that we're going to build an MVP for them within 12 weeks, and we're going to set up KPIs that were going to be helpful for them in building out this solution. So KPIs could have included signups, could have included heavy feature usage, it could have included traffic towards the site. And we realized that after 6 weeks, 70% of the users that they had floated this to were interested in the platform. And so through that, we're able to validate that there was a need, and we closed that problem that I explained to you at the top, which was around product market fit. Now they were building a solution that the market needed, and they were able to scale. And right now, Clutch is a 25 million per year in annual revenue company. So that, in essence, is the 3D formula. Let's go on to the next slide, because what I've explained to you here is a way to use data to build on an already existing solution. But I'm pretty sure there are people in the room here who are trying to build out this solution for the first time, a service business for the first time. So if you're starting from the ground up, how do you go about this? I've explored this framework and built out something called the VALID framework, which is a product decision-making system for finding that product market fit. Now, this is a 3-stage framework, and I like this because it spells out step by step what you as a founder can follow, whether you're building a service business or a product business, in order to build a product that's not going to fall into the statistic of 42% that we saw with products that fail. Mm-hmm. The beginning stage of this is validating. You need to validate your idea. Validation, for me, looks like this. You're solving a hair-on-fire problem. A hair-on-fire problem that is frequent, that is urgent, and that is costly. So, for example, what do I mean by this? Solving a $1,000 problem, solving a $5,000 problem, solving a $10,000 problem, solving $1 million problem are different things. What you need to do is solve the $1 million problems. That's essentially what validation means. The pain is big enough, it's frequent enough, such that you're able to scale your product. You're able to get people out there using it in droves. And that's the validation piece. There's a pain point. It's not just vibes, it's not just excitement. There's a real problem that you're facing. The second phase of that is assessing whether or not internally, am I the right person to solve for this? Also, you're looking at it from the perspective of the market. Is the market ready? There are certain products that if they had been introduced 5-10 years ago, would have been invalid or not accepted into the market. So you want to assess strategic fit in that sense. You also want to figure out whether or not, is the market already solving for this pain? If you found a pain, you don't just go ahead and start solving for that. If you found a pain, you have to think whether or not there are competitors in the market that are already solving for this in a way that is effective or different compared to what you're going for. So that's essentially the assessment phase. At this stage, you're conceptualizing. Now, if it's a goal for all of them, what you want to go ahead and do is begin to refine that. And that's when you ship out your MVP at this stage. Has anyone ever built an MVP before? Okay, great. And can I put you on the spot in terms of what your thinking behind building an MVP was? Was it to learn, or was it to try to monetize it? What was your thinking behind that?
So I'm in the process of building my MVP. It should be done by the end of next month. I'm putting it together so that I can pilot it to get data to make it better and then go to market.
Excellent. And what she said there is the refinement stage. What she's doing with the MVP is she's gathering information. She's learning. And that's exactly what your MVP is supposed to do. Your MVP is supposed to be the easiest version that you put in front of your users to be able to learn. It's all for learning purposes. And you need to set up your KPIs. Some of those KPIs I've already explained with the clutch example look like click-through, look like sign-ups, look like traffic to your website, etc. These are some of the things that you want to think about when you're building out your MVP. After having done that, you want to iterate. After you've learned a bit more about what that MVP looks like, you want to make sure that the feedback that you're getting from your users is being implemented in, a feedback loop to help your product, say, for example, move away from building features that are useless, that people aren't necessarily using. That's what the iteration looks like. Ultimately, when you've got this information, you'll then make a decision of whether or not to take that MVP to market or to pivot and build something that is more acceptable to the marketplace, or ultimately to kill it. That's where dreams go to die, right? So essentially, once you start using this valid framework, you'll be in a position to figure out whether or not there is a big enough problem for you to bring that product to the market. In essence, that's your product market fit problem solved. So I go into depth into a lot of these frameworks and formulas in my book, The Calculated Leader. Let's move on to the next slide. Into my book, The Calculated Leader. Now, let's recap what we've gone through over the last few minutes. The first thing we spoke about was that there is an issue in the marketplace. 42% of startups fail because they don't have product market fit. How do we solve for this? We utilize the 3D formula: data, deliberation, decision making. And that feedback loop helps us to figure out how exactly we can make a product that is ready for the market. Lastly, for founders who are starting up and who haven't necessarily built out a product, the valid framework is helpful for figuring out whether or not the product that you have in mind is going to be acceptable to the marketplace. So that's in essence what I wanted to share with you today. Let's move on to the next slide. I do want to talk to a few individuals here, and if you're interested in having a conversation with me or getting a free assessment of where you are with your product, let's talk. You can scan this. It's a link to my Calendly. There's availability for it over the next 2 weeks, and we can have a 30-minute conversation about whether or not you are building a product that is ready for the market, figure out whether or not we can be of assistance. Let's go to the next slide. I'm wondering if there's anyone here who has any questions. I'm leaving my contact information here as well for anyone who may want to reach out to me. Thank you.
How has AI helped or hurt your either business thought process, or how do you really operate going forward?
Yeah. AI is a bit of a double-edged sword, because the primary rejection that I'm getting right now with a lot of the clients that we talk to is that they're doing a lot of this stuff internally, research internally. So AI is hurting research in that sense. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have used ChatGPT or some other AI tool to figure out whether or not... Sorry, I'm switching bullets here. So a lot of people have tried to utilize AI for their own research purposes. For us, we're actually leveraging AI agents to conduct a lot of the heavy lifting on our research. So we're actually in the process of developing our own proprietary AI agent, and we're being helped by Intellimation. These guys are sitting right over here. They're helping us build out AI agents. And so I think it's been helpful in that sense in terms of automating a lot of the research process that we have. For example, let me give you a practical example. Some of what you might be doing in your research work is building out personas, right? Figuring out whether or not people are going to buy this product. You need to understand the persona behind whoever is intending to buy your product. Now, you can do synthetic personas nowadays where you create a profile of someone who would be a good target for your product and ask that persona specific questions as though you were doing a survey to a human being. That's a practical example of how you can actually validate or test your product in the market by using synthetic persona or synthetic data. So, that's an example of that.
Any more questions?
There's one right here.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm speaking. Guys, divide the thing. There's a Mars to be inscribed.
Let me hear it again.
Triple denial.
Okay, got it. In Nigeria?
You did that. My question, so you're and there, we were asking something. I'm curious, the other approach of that, what's that? Yes. The proposers use only the after leaning. What's your approach? So let's say I'm being on fire, or that's or just a call off where and just paper snaking to by sprawl thing as well. I'm curious, what is your approach now that working with companies that you see, and how is the on that people still get both parts done while the end is I tell it for that like
Yeah. Well, for those who didn't hear the question, is asking about prototyping. Are we seeing anything in the area of artificial intelligence for prototyping? Personally, in the data space, what I've normally seen as far as testing new products are still the old tools. Your user testing, that sort of tool, that's pretty much what we use. Part of what we also do is closed beta. So I believe that to close that product market fit gap, what you want to do is actually get real customers that are going to give you feedback. So your beta clients who are going to give you feedback. And what you're testing for there is usage, you're testing for churn, you're testing for whether or not you're delivering on value. Because you could build a product, people could use it and find some value for a week or two, but there's no repeatability. And that's where we fall into the issue of running out of cash, because you may have found product market fit, but the problem is not necessarily a hair on fire problem that's costly enough or that's frequent enough. So I still think that the best way to learn is through your customers, your beta clients who are utilizing that product, and that within the learning phase or the concept stage of the framework that I shared with you, that's how we can get feedback that's still valuable. I haven't seen anything in the way of AI for that. Real people still need to do that testing.
It's been in products week like here.
Yeah, thank you.
And then it's ships.
Oh, there's one right there.
I didn't reject. We get the jack tickets. I didn't get all the start project fee was for data analysis projects that you found that works great.
Project creep. Today, I still don't have a solution for that. That's the honest answer. Well, a lot of clients still want to add on, take on a lot of the work that we do. So part of what we define, the process that we use for us is coming up with at least a tight proposal upfront, making sure that we define the project parameters for what is going to be feasible in and out of scope. So the regular stuff that we do, managing expectations right at the top, is pretty much how we work on that. So I don't necessarily have anything proprietary that we use for that. It's just a matter of, it's fluid. It's always a conversation with clients.